Hello, everybody, and thank you so much for joining us for today's BU Alumni Career Webinar. You do not have imposter syndrome. My name is Jeff Murphy. I'm a member of the Alumni Career Engagement Team from the BU Alumni Association, which you are all members of. Today's webinar is offered to our 385,000 alumni around the globe, and of course, all of our current students. We appreciate everybody who's joined us today. Some of you tuning in from some places that are very far away from our Boston campuses. Throughout your career, BU is committed to helping you define and achieve your professional goals. And we aim to do this by providing everybody with access to a series of valuable programs, tools, and communities. In addition to this webinar series, one of our most exciting resources is a free online community called BU Connects. If you have not already signed up, I hope you'll take just 5 minutes after this presentation to log in and set up your free profile at buconnects.com. We have over 30,000 BU alumni, students, and faculty and staff already on BU Connects. It is the very best place to build your professional network with other Terriers. You can join regional and special interest and industry groups, become a mentor, find a mentor, or hopefully do both. Before I introduce today's speaker, just a couple housekeeping notes. Today's presentation is being recorded and will soon be made available for on-demand viewing on the Alumni and Friends website, which you can find at bu.edu/alumni. Our speaker, Lee, today is very eager to answer any questions that you may have. You are welcome to submit them throughout the presentation using the Q&A tool on Zoom. Just hover over your toolbar, select Q&A, and you can type in your question whenever you think of it. We'll also be using the chat to hopefully encourage some engagement from all of you today. I think, Lee, you're going to ask a couple questions to ask people to reply in the chat, so we'll be using that as well. It is now my pleasure to introduce our speaker for the day, Questrom School of Business alum Lee Crockett. Lee, MBA, is an executive, career, and sales coach and the founder of Lee Crockett Consulting. Lee's been leading successful teams for over a decade with a focus in sales, account management, and professional development. After experiencing adversity as a woman trying to get promoted in male-dominated industries, Lee developed her signature system that led to several promotions and tripling her salary along the way. Inspired to make a larger impact with women, Lee combined her passions for leading, coaching, sales, and professional development with her MBA in entrepreneurship and launched her coaching practice. There, she helps high-achieving professional women and entrepreneurs get the title and pay they deserve by fast-tracking their promotions, overcoming imposter syndrome, which we'll certainly talk about today, and taking control of their careers. Lee's mission is to help other women shatter the glass ceiling and create their own seat at the table. Lee, we are delighted to have you back and sharing more of your expertise with our community. I will ask you to go ahead. I know you've got a slide deck to share as part of your comments today. Why don't you go ahead and share that here on Zoom, and then the floor will be all yours.
Perfect. Thank you so much for having me. Let me pull up let's see.
Perfect. Looks great.
Perfect. Okay. So Jeff, thank you so much for the intro. I'm really excited to be back home at BU talking about a topic that is one of the foundational cores of the work that I do with women and can also be a little controversial in nature. And you'll see a little bit more about why I say that as we get going. I'm approaching this topic based off of my own experiences in the workplace, based off of work that I have done personally with my clients. Again, my work focuses on women and how we in particular can combat imposter syndrome, or what I say is called imposter syndrome. But for the men in the room, stick with me. There are definitely opportunities to really talk about how to become an ally. And I'm also going to walk us through a few exercises together that, regardless of, who you are or how you show up in the workplace, can help you combat imposter syndrome. So what we're going to do before we jump into the meat and potatoes is I'm just going to give you a quick recap of everything that we're going to talk about. So I'll do a little bit more of a deep dive into my intro and tell you more about me and why I do the work that I do. Then we're going to talk about all things imposter syndrome, right? What it is, why, in my opinion, you don't have it, and what's really going on in our day to day, in our lives at work that make us think that we do have it. And then, like I said, we'll walk through some exercises that will help you level set and move past those feelings and really talk about what you can do moving forward to combat those feelings of imposter syndrome in your life and in your career. There are opportunities, like I said, throughout for us to discuss allyship and how you can be a support system for other women in your workplace, whether you're a woman or not. And then we'll end with Q&A and a special surprise that I have for BU alumni. So if you're excited, because I know I am, and you're ready to get going, just give me a quick ready in the chat, and then we can dive into my background. I can't quite see the chat, but are we getting ready, Jeff? Looks like we are. Okay, perfect. So Jeff gave you a brief intro, but a little bit more about me. I have a professional background in sales and people leadership. My experience is based in business development, account management, operations, and training and development. I have worked in consumer packaged goods in the food and beverage space mostly, as well as manufacturing. I got my undergrad degree from BU, as you know, and I got my MBA from Babson College. All of the roles that I've had in my career have been in extremely male dominated industries. And trust me, I don't know many other women who manufacture mattress foam like like I did. Um, so when I really sit back and I think about the different roles that I've had, there are a few really pivotal moments that stand out to me and shaped who I am as a person back then, and really who I am as a coach, and really informed my work as well. So I graduated from BU in '09, and that was a year early. And I started work right away as a frontline sales leader. So, to paint the picture for you, I was 21. I was leading a team of men who really could have all easily been my father or grandfather. I think at the time, the youngest person on my team was early 40s. So, I had some challenges in front of me. I know that you can see the bullet points on the screen, but really, I want to emphasize that my career in its entirety, for the most part, I have been all of these things all at the same time. So I have been the youngest person. I've been the only woman. I've definitely been the only woman of color. I've been the only woman in a leadership position all at the same time. Typically, in my work backgrounds outside of the administrative admin and corporate HR, I was the only woman on the front line. So what that really boils down to is a lot of times there was a boys club all around me, and I had to figure a lot of things out on my own. There was nobody who came before me where I could say, oh, this is the path that I follow. Here's how I achieve my professional goals. Um, and I had a lot of questions. How do I figure this out? How do I get promoted? How do I build my confidence? And really, how do I even, at a basic level, just be taken seriously? So I also had a lot of challenges because I was on the sales front. So I had adversity internally and externally, right? Selling to customers and handling adversity from my coworkers and employees. I had to have a really tough and thick skin, which is really a blessing in disguise for me looking back at it now. Oh, we're stuck. There we go. So eventually I was able to find my way and I started moving up the ranks. But I really noticed that there was no formal training available as reinforcement to other people. So I took everything that I had learned along the way and I started creating training and coaching opportunities for anybody that I could really get my hands on or find. So this was direct employees, but also the entire frontline, colleagues, anybody that I could work with. I put a really big focus on professional development. And after some time, I noticed that the people that I had been working with were getting promoted as well. So fast forward to a couple years after grad school, I decided that I wanted to be a coach. I wanted to continue this work, and I wasn't sure exactly how I wanted to niche down. I spent some time really thinking about not only what I could offer and what I brought to the table, but what I was really passionate about, and that it was rooted in helping women combat the gender pay gap. So this is an issue that has been going on for decades. I'm sure we're all familiar with it. But even just in recent times, there are studies that have shown that men were promoted 3 times as often as women during the COVID-19 pandemic. So this is something that is not going away. It's something that, yes, there is improvement, but there's a long road to go. And that's why I do the work that I do. I help women get the title and pay they deserve through executive career and sales coaching and training. Essentially, I teach women how to play the corporate game. I believe in helping them get a seat at the table, and I work with them to understand corporate politics, to navigate imposter syndrome and really focus on taking control of their career, giving them options, and making them feel like they are in the driver's seat when it comes to what happens next for them. So, in order to do this work, again, we have to tackle imposter syndrome. It's by far one of the biggest factors holding women in particular back from owning their careers and taking the next step forward. So, this is one of my missions, and I'm really excited to be able to talk to you about it today. So, let's transition into what is imposter syndrome. It's not exactly a new concept, but I think particularly over the past 5 to 10 years, it's been a really hot buzzword. Imposter syndrome actually dates back to the late 1970s. And if you haven't heard of it by that term, I guarantee you're familiar with the concept or you've experienced the feelings that are associated with imposter syndrome. So, imposter syndrome is those meddling thoughts or feelings that really cause you to question or doubt your abilities. It's what makes you wonder deep down if you're the right person or the best person for the job because of your, limited experience. And I say that with quotation marks. It's really what makes you feel like a fraud, even though you may have the qualifications. For example, do you have a degree in finance, but you don't trust yourself to run the right kind of report or provide an analysis without a teammate or somebody to help you do it? That's imposter syndrome. If you feel like you don't belong or you're unqualified because you have less tenure, even though you might have that MBA or that advanced degree that your coworkers don't have, that's imposter syndrome. If you feel like you shouldn't apply for the job because you can only check 7 out of the 10 boxes on the list of requirements in the description, that's imposter syndrome. It really causes you to question yourself and your skills and your talents and your natural innate abilities and really everything about yourself. It leaves you feeling really confused and unsure about who you are, what your purpose is, what you want, where and how you want to move forward. And it makes you feel like you don't really deserve any kind of success or recognition or praise that's coming your way. It makes it very difficult to accept your accomplishments. And a lot of people push ownership and responsibility for the win to teammates or colleagues. Or what ends up happening is you deflect any positive reinforcement or attention that comes your way. Does that sound familiar? If that sounds familiar, drop me a yes in the chat. Um, if you have ever felt embarrassed about accepting credit for a win at work, and what you do is you say, "Oh, thank you so much, but it was really blah blah blah," right? It was this person, it was the team, or I just supported, they did all of the work, then that's imposter syndrome. We have all done it at one point or another, and that's okay. What I really hope you're seeing by me belaboring this slide, right, is that imposter syndrome is common. It's normal. It is typically affecting high achieving people, mostly because these people, myself included, are shooting for perfection or near perfection in their everyday performance. The last thing that I really want to have you sit with is that imposter syndrome has been reported to be experienced equally by men and women. I really want to pause here and, like I said, repeat that. Imposter syndrome is experienced equally by men and women. But I'm sure, particularly for the women in the room, you're like, that can't be right. It doesn't sound like it's right, does it? So if imposter syndrome is experienced equally by both men and women, why is it such a devastating experience for women in particular? And I'm not saying that this doesn't happen to men at all, right? But overall, what we've seen, both in my work and in studies that I have read, is that men are find it easier from an emotional support and environment perspective to be able to move forward and not overcome it. It's not something that ever goes away, but that's something that I really want to dig into. Women in particular, Lee, find that imposter syndrome can stop them in their tracks. It can delay career advancement, or it can even end career possibilities before they can really begin. So let's dive into it. If you're ready to talk about why this is, give me a ready in the chat and we'll keep it going. I can't see the chat, but I see the numbers moving. So I think I'm getting readies. Okay. So let's talk about the experience of men with imposter syndrome versus the same experience with women. There are stark differences in the way that men are treated in the workplace compared to women. It's not universal across the board, but in generalities, I think we can agree that women have slightly more obstacles to face compared to men. And there are subsets and different standards and treatments when additionally you add in race to the conversation, right? So if we talk about men in the workplace, they experience bouts or waves of imposter syndrome just the way that women do. You wonder if you're the right fit for the job. You wonder if you're qualified. You wonder if you're smart enough. You wonder if you belong, right? These questions, though, are pretty quickly answered for you because typically men are met with positive feedback more quickly, more plentifully, and more readily compared to women colleagues. So you're getting reinforcement from colleagues, peers, superiors, leadership, and you're welcomed into the fold. You're affirmed for your efforts, you're praised for your performance, you're encouraged to continue what you're doing. So you are more likely to develop a sense of belonging and feel safe. And that sense of safety allows you to build your confidence and shake off those pesky feelings of imposter syndrome when they do return. So I want to be clear that imposter syndrome is not something that goes away. These feelings do return, but you've already been affirmed as a man in the workplace, typically, that these thoughts are not real, right? Everybody's telling me I'm great. I am smart. I am qualified. The last report was wonderful. So I'm feeling better about myself. And you're less likely to feel the paralyzing effects that imposter syndrome has on other people. So let's zero in on what happens to women in the workplace. So women are more likely to feel isolated, to feel challenged or questioned. They're more likely to feel dismissed. when they have ideas, my clients tell me all the time, and this has happened to me, that they're either ignored or somebody repeats their idea a day later. And that person is praised for, having this magical revelation that they vocalized the day before and it fell on deaf ears, right? So essentially, when those things are happening, this is exclusive behavior and it has devastating effects on women. So, the more that women are not given credit for their work, the more that they're not listened to or heard or paid attention to, the more that they're not acknowledged for their contributions in the workplace, the more that they are taught to internalize these results and tell themselves that these are happening because of things that they did wrong. It's reinforcing those bouts of imposter syndrome. And unlike what happens with men, where they're taught that, these feelings are not real, it's reinforcing to a woman that this is real. This is me. I am the problem. So those thoughts of I'm not smart enough, and if I'm not being affirmed that I am smart enough, then guess what? It must be true that I'm not. It also teaches women not to put themselves in the position to either repeat the same mistake or embarrass themselves in front of others again. And what happens? They tend to not raise their hand when they have an idea. They tend to fall into the background, which is really a breeding ground for imposter syndrome to grow. So the other piece that happens in the corporate workplace is because there are limited amounts of what I'll call seats at the table with women, right? If you sit in a senior leadership meeting and there's majority of men, unfortunately, what happens is that women also contribute significantly to developing and perpetuating imposter syndrome in other women. We feel competition, right? If there's only room for one woman on this leadership team, it has to be me, right? So unfortunately, we're also guilty of hurting each other instead of helping each other. So for men and women in the room, I recognize we all want to win. We all want to, further our careers, but at what cost? I'd like you to take just a quick second and really think about any opportunities that you have had to be an ally or to be a support system for others where maybe you chose not to do that. And that's okay, but really identifying these opportunities of how you can support other women is really important to overcoming this high level thought that we all have imposter syndrome. What I would offer you, and this is warning label controversial statement, right? Is that we don't really have imposter syndrome at all. And what do I mean by that? What I want you to consider is that imposter syndrome, given everything that I've just explained in terms of corporate politics and dynamics, is not some disease or condition that you have just sporadically inherited, right? Imposter syndrome is the manufactured manifestation of systemic oppression against women. What I mean by that is that for women in particular, imposter syndrome was created for you. It's administered to you on almost a daily basis in the way that, you were treated in the workplace. And it is a tool that can be used to prevent your advancement in your career. So, my hope in having this kind of discussion with you is that it makes you angry, right? And it confirms that the experiences that you're having, particularly in male dominated industries, are valid and the feelings are not real. You are qualified. You are smart. You earned the position that you have. You can and should be promoted. You have innovative ideas that should be shared and implemented in the organization. Um, so what I would like to do with you, whether you're a woman or a male, like everybody in the room, is move through some actionable tactics and exercises that you can use when these fake feelings of imposter syndrome start popping up. So if you're ready to try something new, give me a new in the chat. Perfect. So in order to really combat imposter syndrome, the first thing we need to do is introspection, which is typically not our go-to. Um, we really have to peel back the layers so we can empower ourselves to move past those persistent feelings whenever they crop up. Imposter syndrome really thrives when we feel isolated, and it's designed for us to blame ourselves for what's happening in our world. We have to find ways to get out of that habit, and I've developed a way of doing that that really helps my clients move forward and break old patterns. So the first thing to do is really think about who you are as a person. If you're experiencing significant bouts of these feelings, you're more than likely a high achieving individual, right? You have high standards and expectations, and you're typically seeking perfection in most of the things that you do. You're probably very competitive. You probably want to be the best at what you do. You want to be seen as an expert. And what that means is you probably also carry feelings of guilt and shame if you fail. And you're also potentially afraid of disappointing others, whether that's your partner, your kids, your parents, other family members, or friends. It's very common. This was me. It's probably you, right? We have to normalize it. This is so many of us. What I want to work on with you briefly is how did you get to this place, right? How did you become this version of yourself, seeking perfection, super high expectations? Take a look at this quote quickly and see how this resonates with you. It says expectations are premeditated resentments. Something that's really important to weigh here is that perfection does not exist. As a high achieving person who's afraid of failure, really think about this. If you're hardwired to seek out something that doesn't even exist, you're pre programmed to fail every single time. And what you've done is you've created this perpetual loop of shame and guilt that you won't be able to climb out of. Some people say it's imposter syndrome, but I say it's rooted a little bit deeper. And those are those premeditated resentments. What we need to understand now is that you were not born a high achiever who seeks perfection, right? These behaviors and expectations developed over time. So, what I want you to think about and consider is where did it come from? Who gave them to you, right? Was it mom? Was it dad? Was it a teacher? Someone, regardless of their intent, right? Our family and friends love us. They want what's best for us. But regardless of the intent, somebody set these expectations for you, whether that was explicitly telling you this is the standard or what I expect, or you inferring that from their words or their actions. So I'll give you an example. Maybe dad told you very early on that, runners up are the first loser. We've heard that before, right? This is the expectation. If you don't bring home an A, then even if it's an A minus or a B plus, you've still failed, right? It's not good enough. Um, Maybe you felt like you needed to compete with a sibling. Um, Maybe your mom spent all her time cleaning the house and now, you can't even stand for a crumb to be on the floor, right? Wherever those messages have come from, you have internalized them and you seek out trading these perfectionist behaviors, right? Like if I do my best, then I'll be accepted, then I'll be loved, then I will feel like I have the self-worth that I want. Um, And to complicate things a little bit further, we also have to understand that the people who gave us, I like to call it like this backpack of expectations, right? It was inherited from others as well. And this is what we call generational trauma. So if you look at the timeline quickly, it's 2025, 2024, right? And we're on the far right of this slide. If you're experiencing what we're calling imposter syndrome in your day to day life, right? Go back a generation to think about when you started inheriting these messages and expectations. I put 1990. Everybody's born a different year, but insert the year that you were born there, right? This is where you started receiving those messages of what is and is not acceptable behavior. This is where you were reinforced when you performed a certain way. But if you go back one more generation, this is potentially where the generational trauma occurred. This could be your grandparent or your great grandparent instilling those things in your parent, right? The action item here is to understand that you do have this backpack of expectations, but it's not yours, right? Somebody gave it to you and said, here, wear this, but you can make the decision to put it down. So the way that you break the pattern and the importance of not breaking the pattern is that this is something that can continue on into future generations if you don't put an end to it. So how you do that is really releasing expectations. And this is easier, like I said, right? These expectations don't belong to you. You have no obligation to continue to carry that backpack. It's a really heavy load that you never signed up for. And you can just simply take it off and put it down. So if you close your eyes for 1 second, picture all of the built up expectations that have been given to you and all of the additional ones that you put in your own backpack because you're not living up to the ones that were given to you, or you feel like you have to do more. They are not serving you. So I want you, like I said, to take off your backpack, feel the weight of it, put it down on the ground, and walk away. The second thing that we're going to do is deactivate, excuse me, that fight or flight response. So it's super easy to be paralyzed by fear. It can really stop us in our tracks. And it's difficult for us to make decisions because when we're overwhelmed, it turns into a greater feeling of fear. So we ask a lot of what if questions, right? Particularly in the workplace. Um, and what happens is, what if I take on this project and I can't deliver? What if I'm not good enough? What if I don't know how to do this? What if? And that keeps us from taking action. So what I want to do is, instead of our default response which is to typically shut off those questions, right? Like, oh, you're going down a rabbit hole. It doesn't make sense. Stop, stop, stop. Allow yourself to answer those questions, right? What if you do poorly on a report and you get fired, right? What if XYZ happens, right? And to just give a really simple or semi-silly example, right? If you got fired, right? Would you be able to find another job given your skills and your qualifications? Yes, right? Would you do whatever it took to support yourself and your family until you were able to make ends meet again? Yes, right? Would you work at McDonald's if you had to? Yes, right? The whole point of following down the what ifs and answering the questions is, instead of that flight response, you're showing your brain that no matter what happens, you'd still be okay. And that really reduces that pressure and those thoughts of fear that keep you paralyzed. And the last piece of this is the alignment. It's important to align yourself with who you really are and what you really want. So now that you put down the backpack, really take some time to understand what you're working towards using your own voice, right? Not through the filter of those people who had those high expectations of you. What is it that you want? And are you on a path to achieve those things? Or have you just been chasing the VP title because, your sister became a VP in 10 years and you wanted to beat her, right? What is it that you really want and spend some time using your own voice. Because at the end of the day, if you're not living a life that aligns with your purpose and your wants, you won't be fulfilled even when you achieve that thing. So I want to pause here and give you just a little bit of time for reflection. You don't have to share, but if there's any aha that's come out of this exercise that you'd like to share, please drop that in the chat.
One comment that's already come in from Valerie is some of the fear is based in lacking confidence that I can handle what comes up.
Mhm. Right. And what I would say to that is this last exercise we just did, right? What if blah, blah, blah happens? What would I do? What would I say? How would I handle it? And okay, if that happens and then this happened, right? Like follow through the what ifs. Staying paralyzed in the fear keeps us from action. And that's another difference, going back to the difference between men and women in the workplace, right? Men are, studies have shown, more likely to take healthy risks in the workplace versus women really being held back. And the way that studies have also shown that the way that you learn is not through education, which is what women typically default to, right? That next degree, that next course, but on the job mistake making and learning from that. So definitely follow that through.
Interesting point from Linda. There's a tendency to catastrophize, which leads to the paralysis.
Mhm. Absolutely. Absolutely. And that's, again, this last exercise of feeling like, okay, let me just shake myself out of it, but we still automatically jump to the worst case scenario. If you can coax your brain into calming down by understanding that I will be okay regardless of this outcome, you're more likely to at least collect enough facts to make a decision and take that next action.
A great comment from Christine. I feel inadequate in some conversations in my workplace, so I've decided that perhaps pursuing a master's degree in a specific field will help strengthen my knowledge and get me taken more seriously and make me more promotable. But there's also part of me that thinks it's an extreme step. That's obviously a massive investment of time and resources to get a master's degree. And it's something that Christine's really battling with.
Mhm. Yeah, absolutely. And we're kind of heading into Q&A, which is why I stopped my screen share. But yeah, I completely understand that. I got my MBA mostly because it was something that I had a personal goal, right? Like using my own voice. It's something that I wanted. But this is something I say to my clients all the time, and I find it very common of, you don't need that next degree. And just reiterating what I just shared is that studies have shown that when it comes to learning and gaining the skills needed to advance their career, women typically default to formal education. And men typically default to let me try this and see how it works, right? Which is a contributing factor into how and why men may be getting promoted at a more rapid rate compared to women because they're getting that on the job learning and improving at a faster rate. Whereas women are like, okay, I need to understand every single thing about the thing before I make a move. And studies have shown that actual on the job action is what improves the skill set and makes you more ready for career advancement compared to going back to get the degree or taking the course. It's really delaying that progress. So what I'm going to do is just share my screen one more time for wrap up, and then we will go into Q&A if there are any additional questions.
That's a
Bear
great
with
reminder,
me.
folks. If you've got questions for Lee, we're going to have a few minutes at the end here. Go ahead and submit them in the Q&A box if you can, or otherwise I can keep an eye on the chat. We've got some great comments coming in, though, from folks, particularly about this idea of needing to go on to another degree, and comments from a few folks that have done that and have felt like the investment of their time and money didn't pay off in the way that they'd hoped.
Yeah, yeah, and I'm happy to chat about that a little bit more. But just to wrap up and for final takeaways, it's really important to understand, like I said, in our society, we attribute a lot of things to imposter syndrome. And what I would offer is that, again, it is a systemic problem, particularly for women. And there are tools and tactics that can help you overcome it. It's not something that ever goes away. But again, I really feel, and what I've seen from my work is that the most imperative piece is peeling back those layers, is letting go of that backpack, and is really tapping into what it is that you want, right? When you let go of those expectations and you let your own voice guide you, then you'll be able to create a career plan that really reflects your goals. And from there, you execute, right? Women in particular are very great, not to say that men aren't, but we can get stuff done, right? It's really all of the behind the scenes work that is really important for us to do to be able to start executing. So the last thing that I would offer is, thank you so much again for having me. I have a special offer for BU alumni. If you are interested in learning more about this topic, or if you're interested in learning more about the programs that I offer, I'll drop, or maybe Jeff, if you could drop the link in the chat. I'm happy to extend a complimentary breakthrough session to you to talk through some of the challenges that you feel like you're facing, and also offer a BU alumni discount for anyone who decides that this is work that they are ready to tackle now. So I am so happy to be here, and I will stay on for Q&A. If you would like to connect outside of that, you can find me on Instagram, or here's my email as well, and I welcome any questions that you may have. So I will stop my share and open up for any questions.
Awesome, Lee. Thank you so much. And I did just go ahead and drop that bit.ly link into the chat. It looks like
Perfect.
it's hyperlinked, so everybody should be able to go right to that. And thank you for making that incredible offer for our alumni and BU community. It's really fantastic. We do have one question that's come in so far. Uh,
Mhm.
how do you suggest navigating the workplace with women leaders who are not supporting women and adding to the imposter syndrome? And this question's coming from a minority, and the senior leaders are all white women. Certainly, Lee, this is something that you had experience with. You mentioned that early on. What are your thoughts about specifically navigating that situation?
Yeah, it's really difficult. And like I said, during the early portions of this conversation, is that it's an unfortunate reality, but I think it's one that we need to talk about, right? A lot of the conversation is largely on, men against women in the workplace. And we really have to start calling out the fact that not every woman in the workplace is like, hey girl, let me help you out, let's do this together, right? It's a very much you or me kind of attitude. What I would suggest, and what has worked for me personally in my career, is really finding your people, right? Like your advocates. Who is it, man or woman in the organization, that is truly a supporter of you? Typically, especially if this is somebody that you report to directly, there is a separation between you and upper leadership, right? So this person directly can impact the trajectory of your career. If they support you, you can get promoted pretty easily, right? And that's that navigating corporate politics that I talk about as well. And if they view you as a threat, as competition, if they don't like the work that you do, if they don't like, the clothes that you wear, whatever it may be, right? They have the opportunity to keep you segregated from senior leadership, or that next level up where you may have supporters. So, what's really important in this kind of situation is you utilize any kind of networking activities that there are, right? Whether there are ERGs, whether there are women's groups, whether there are skip level one on one opportunities, right? You really have to build relationships outside of and around that group that you feel is holding you back. Because if you rely just on, hierarchy, well, this is the next person, and these are the only kinds of conversations or relationships that I'll have, is you'll still, frankly be in this spot 5 or 10 years from now saying like, hey, I don't know how else to combat it. So the short answer is you need to start building relationships with people outside of that circle, and really start having conversations about what you're good at, what opportunities you're interested in, right? That's how people get promoted. An opportunity comes about and it's like, oh, well, I was just having a conversation with Jeff. He's super interested in this. Let me reach out to him behind the scenes and see if he's interested, if this is something that he'd want to take on. So networking is going to be extremely important for you moving forward.
A lot of people just mentioning in the chat how much they appreciated this presentation. So
Oh, thank you.
kudos to you, Lee. I was wondering, as you were talking, you mentioned systematic oppression of women. And it's also got me thinking about there's so many members of our BU community that checking off the box, male or female, isn't necessarily a yes or no. We've got trans folks, non-binary
Mhm.
folks. In your practice, or have you seen any studies? I'm guessing that it's not something that's necessarily been studied, but does any of your advice or feedback on how to combat this change for other oppressed communities?
It doesn't exactly change. What I would say is it intensifies, right? So if you look at again, stereotypically or very high level, right? What I would say is in the hierarchy of us being able to combat these feelings and feel that sense of safety, right? You have white men at the very, very top, or white men identifying people, right? Followed by men of color, followed by white women, followed by women of color. And then I would offer that, people in the LGBTQIA plus community would be at, the bottom of the list in terms of feelings of safety, feelings of security, feelings of, confidence in not so much who they are, but the value that they bring to the table, how they're accepted. So I think that the more you get away from, that traditional, I would say, white man in corporate culture, the more complexities and more difficulty you would have in combating some of these challenges.
Yeah. Lee, you had there was a question in the chat if you could reshare your social handles, and you actually accidentally just sent them to me, but I went ahead and
Oh, I'm
copied
so
them.
sorry.
No, that's okay. I copied them in so that everybody could see your social handle,
Perfect.
Lee Crockett, and also your the link to your LinkedIn profile,
Mhm.
which is great. But lots of folks again in the chat just chiming in to say that they really appreciate what you've offered today and what you shared, and I want to join them in saying thank you so much for sharing this presentation. And we'll go ahead and share the recording with everybody so they can go back and take a look at what was a great presentation. So again, Lee, on behalf of everybody at BU, thank you so much for doing this for us.
Perfect. Thank you so much for having me.
I also want to thank everybody for tuning in today from again all around the world. And I want to say a special thank you to those of you who've donated to a cause at BU that you care about. We wouldn't be able to do this work without your support. Our monthly webinar series actually takes a hiatus in July and August, but we'll be back strong in September. In the meantime, I want to remind everybody, if you haven't already, make sure you join BU Connects. That's a great way to build your network. And always keep an eye over the summer. We still have lots of alumni events in cities around the world and online. So always keep an eye on the alumni events calendar on our website. Make sure that you're keeping an eye on your email for our monthly alumni career newsletter, The Edge, where we always share information about great career resources, things like season 3 of our Proud to Be You podcast, which is great alumni sharing interesting stories about the twists and turns of their careers. You can find that again all on our website, bu.edu/alumni. So thank you again, everybody, for tuning in. And thank you again, Lee, for a great presentation.
Thank you so much.
Hope everybody has a great day or a great evening wherever you might be. Take care.